When the sun set over medieval Europe and shadows stretched across narrow, filthy streets, a different kind of fear crept into the minds of its people, the fear of sickness. To be ill in the Dark Ages was not just a trial of the body but a descent into terror, for medicine was a strange blend of faith, superstition, and desperate trial. Imagine a world where the cause of disease was not understood, where invisible germs were unknown, and where the cure was often as dangerous as the illness itself. A simple fever could send families into prayer, their whispered pleas rising with the smoke of tallow candles. Physicians, trained more in ancient texts than observation, often saw the human body as a battlefield of humors, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. To restore balance meant bloodletting, leeches, or violent purges. Picture yourself lying on a rough straw bed, the air thick with the stench of sweat and smoke, while a barber surgeon sharpens his blade to open your veins. The trickle of blood is believed to save you, but in truth, it often weakens the body further, leaving the patient pale, trembling, and closer to death than to life. For ordinary peasants, sickness brought dread not only because of the pain but also because of what the cure might entail. Herbs gathered from hedgerows were ground into pastes, mixed with honey or wine, and spread on festering wounds, their effectiveness uncertain. Some remedies were born of desperation and folklore, swallowing powdered toads, drinking potions made from crushed beetles, or wearing amulets inscribed with holy verses. To the sick, every object might hold power, every whisper of a cure was worth a try. Healers often doubled as mystics, muttering incantations over the ill, crossing themselves, and invoking saints. In smoky cottages, mothers pressed charms into their children's hands, hoping to ward off fevers that could snatch away life overnight. But just beyond these humble acts lay even stranger and more chilling practices. Diseases struck without mercy, spreading through cramped villages where sanitation was little more than wishful thinking. Open drains ran through streets, pigs and dogs scavenged among refuse, and the air itself carried a heavy, sour stench. Small cuts festered into infections, and with no knowledge of bacteria, the solution was often cauterization, searing flesh with hot iron to drive out the sickness. Imagine the scream of a man as glowing metal pressed against a wound, the smell of charred skin filling the room, while his neighbors crossed themselves in silent dread. For broken bones, rough wooden splints and tight bindings were the only recourse, often leaving limbs twisted or useless for life. And yet, within this landscape of terror, there was resilience. Communities clung together, sharing what remedies they knew, trading herbs, and carrying the sick to monasteries where monks practiced a gentler kind of care. Though their knowledge was limited, the monks copied ancient medical texts, preserved herbal wisdom, and prayed endlessly, believing faith itself could cure what the body could not. For the wealthy and the powerful, illness revealed a different kind of theater. Royal chambers filled with the muttering of physicians, their hands heavy with rings, prescribing treatments drawn from Galen or Hippocrates, think powders of crushed pearls, gold elixirs, or exotic spices imported at great cost. But even kings and queens could not escape the horrors of Dark Age medicine. Some drank concoctions laced with mercury, believing it purified the body, unaware it was slowly poisoning them. Others submitted to trepanation, the drilling of holes in the skull to release evil spirits said to cause madness or seizures. Imagine a nobleman lying still while a crude drill grinds into bone, no anesthetic but prayers whispered through clenched teeth. The practice was ancient, brutal, and often fatal, yet it reflected the desperation of a world searching for answers in the dark. The people of this era lived each day under the shadow of death, where medicine was as much ritual as it was remedy. To survive an illness was often seen as divine favor, a miracle rather than the work of human hands. And so, as the night deepened and torches guttered in the wind, the sick clung to hope, the healers clung to faith, and together they endured in a world where to be cured was sometimes as terrifying as being ill. The world of medieval medicine grew even darker when the Black Death swept across Europe, leaving no village untouched and no family unscarred. In the mid-14th century, this invisible killer arrived like a storm, spreading faster than anyone could understand. Whole towns were emptied, their streets silent except for the wails of the dying and the tolling of church bells. Panic spread as swiftly as the plague itself, and with little knowledge of how disease moved, people clutched at desperate remedies. Some believed the air itself was poisoned, so they carried pomanders, spheres filled with herbs, spices, or vinegar, pressing them to their noses in hope of filtering out the death in the air. Others burned great piles of aromatic wood in the streets, hoping smoke could drive the pestilence away. But the sickened fell anyway, their bodies marked with black swellings, fevers raging, and life slipping away in days. Into this terror stepped the figure of the plague doctor, now one of history's most haunting symbols. Dressed in long dark robes, leather gloves, and wide-brimmed hats, they moved like shadows through the streets. Their faces were hidden by grotesque bird-like masks, the long beak stuffed with dried flowers and herbs meant to ward off poisonous air. To the common folk, these doctors seemed more like grim reapers than healers, for wherever they appeared, death was close behind. Their methods, though well-intentioned, often brought little comfort. Patients were bled to release the sickness, or forced to drink concoctions of vinegar and ground emeralds. Some were even pressed to inhale the fumes of boiling tar or lie in rooms filled with snakes, the belief being that venom might draw out plague. It was a world where the cure could seem more horrifying than the disease itself. But if medicine was a battlefield of strange remedies, the people's responses were often stranger still. Fear twisted into superstition. Some communities blamed outsiders, leading to persecution and violence. Others turned inward to faith, marching in processions with chants and prayers, whipping themselves in hopes that suffering might appease God and halt the plague. Entire groups of flagellants wandered from town to town, their backs bloodied by whips, their songs echoing through the night. To them, healing could only come through divine forgiveness, not herbs or knives. And yet, while churches filled with prayers, graveyards filled with bodies. So many died that mass pits were dug, corpses stacked together in silence, and priests struggled to keep up with burials. Families abandoned loved ones, fearing contamination, leaving the sick to perish alone in their homes. The plague revealed not just the failures of medicine, but the fragility of society itself. Still, amidst despair, a strange kind of resilience grew. Monasteries became sanctuaries where monks risked their lives tending the ill, using herbal remedies, washing wounds with wine, or simply offering comfort as death approached. Women, too, stepped forward as healers, midwives, and caregivers, passing down folk remedies that sometimes proved more effective than the practices of trained physicians. Simple acts, like boiling water, cleaning wounds, or burning infected clothes, hinted at a wisdom beyond superstition, though they were rarely recognized as science. In the flickering glow of candles, ordinary people stitched hope into the fabric of daily life, even when surrounded by darkness. The Black Death was more than a disease, it was a mirror of the age. It revealed how little was known, how fragile communities were, and how terrifying the human struggle for survival could become. Each night that fell over plague-stricken towns carried the weight of uncertainty. Would the morning bring healing, or would it reveal only silence where once there was life? And so, as Europe stumbled through these grim years, medicine became a desperate mixture of ritual, fear, and fleeting hope, binding people together in the shared terror of an age that groped blindly for light. As the centuries wore on, the terror of medieval medicine never truly faded, yet small sparks of knowledge began to flicker in the darkness. The later Middle Ages saw whispers of change, though they came slowly and often against great resistance. Physicians still clung to the ancient idea of humors, yet some dared to question, to observe, to test. In universities, scholars pored over translated works from the Islamic world, where medicine was advancing more quickly, introducing new herbs, surgical techniques, and a deeper respect for observation. Still, for most of Europe, illness was fought with a blend of faith and fear. A headache might be treated with charms worn around the neck, a fever by bathing in vinegar, and madness by drilling a hole into the skull to let evil spirits escape. Imagine lying helpless as a crude tool bites into bone, the night air filled with prayers as your family hopes the pain will drive away demons. This was the thin line between cure and torture in the Dark Ages. In villages and towns, folk remedies held just as much weight as a physician's word. Midwives and wise women brewed potions of willow bark to dull pain, or chamomile to soothe fever. They laid garlic on wounds, crushed sage for sore throats, and passed down knowledge earned not from books but from generations of trial. Yet, these women often walked a dangerous path, for when remedies failed, suspicion of witchcraft was never far behind. The line between healer and heretic was perilously thin. Fires sometimes lit the night sky, not for healing, but for burning those accused of wielding dark magic in their cures. Medicine was never only about the body, it was about belief, fear, and power. For the wealthy, extravagant treatments continued, sometimes more deadly than the illness itself. Mercury was still consumed as a supposed purifier, despite its poison. Crushed gems, exotic spices, and even powdered mummy imported from Egypt were mixed into tonics. To drink such mixtures was to swallow both wealth and desperation. The poor looked on, clinging to their simpler remedies, relying on the mercy of neighbors and the endurance of their own bodies. Yet across both rich and poor, one truth remained: survival was uncertain, and death was always close at hand. The cemeteries of Europe filled with reminders that medicine had as much to do with ritual and luck as it did with knowledge. And yet, it was from this darkness that a path toward the future began. The terrible lessons of plague, the failure of superstition, and the bravery of those who observed rather than recited paved the way for a new age of medicine. By the end of the Middle Ages, the foundations of anatomy were being laid through dissections, despite the outrage of some authorities. Herbal knowledge was compiled into manuscripts that would guide healers for centuries. The seeds of modern science were sown in the soil of suffering. Still, for those who lived and died in the Dark Ages, medicine remained a haunting mix of hope and horror. It was a world where prayers mingled with bloodletting, where fire both healed and destroyed, and where the line between life and death was as fragile as a flickering candle in the night. As dawn rose each day over medieval towns, it brought with it no certainty, only another chance to endure. And so the people of the Dark Ages lived with courage in the face of fear, enduring cures as terrifying as the sickness itself, and leaving behind a legacy that reminds us just how far humanity has come, and how much it once suffered in the shadow of its own ignorance.